Hello everyone, and welcome to this video, which is now Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler. We're carrying on our look at the great Italian player Sergio Mariotti, the Italian Fury. And we're carrying on with a game against Mariotti-Bhend, a Swiss player, best known for defeating Michal Tal in 1959, I think it was, one of Tal's attacks that went wrong at the Zurich tournament, 1959. But here, another very thrilling game, but our hero comes out on top, especially for Mr. Beads, Leela's greatest fan, and also a Semi-Slav absolute addict. Then this game is a Semi-Slav. Let's have a little look at what happened. So d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, knight f6, and now the rather unusual move bishop g5. One move earlier than normal. The normal Botvinnik Semi-Slav is knight f3, e6, and now bishop g5, and after d takes c4, e4, and then afterwards b5, e5. Lots of sharp lines, but bishop g5 on move 4. The engines don't like it at all. After d takes c4, they're already giving minus 0.31. But I mean, from a human perspective, it's absolutely fine. You're just going for a typical sort of structure, a typical sort of scenario, and whether it's a bit better or a bit worse doesn't really matter in a human game. E4 played by Mariotti. The engines were preferring E3, a little bit more solid, B5 and then A4, trying to weaken this queen side. But E4 is a pretty natural move. And after B5, then E5. Actually interesting to think, what would you do after knight f3? I mean, e6 would transpose into the Botvinnik, but the engines were actually looking at going h6, bishop h4, and then g5, bishop g3, bishop g7. But I mean, White's got decent play here. I mean, bishop e2, castles. Never really worry about b4. You go knight a4, black takes the e4 pawn, but we take the c4 pawn, and the queen side is weak. That's always decent compensation for white. So knight bd7, queen c2. Yeah, I've played positions like this as white, and it's perfectly decent human compensation basically for the pawn. White's got those two central pawns. Difficult for black to get out the white position for the moment, but of course black's got a pawn up, and long term, if black manages to protect the queen side and get c5 in, exchange off the c pawn for the d pawn, then black's doing really, really well, of course. So just an interesting normal situation. So that would have been possible too. But Mariotti played e5, not wanting to worry too much about that pawn on e4. Knight d5, and now a4. And black plays h6, and Mariotti went bishop d2. I mean, basically you've got a sort of a normal position, but where black has got the extra move h6. In principle, that should be handy for black, because white's knight or bishop often wants to go to g5, and getting h6 in for free is pretty good. The only thing that it does do, it does weaken the light squares on the king side a little bit. G6 also gives white a target, this h6 pawn, if black castles king side. So there's a few cons to it, but in general, including h6 is quite positive for black. So Bhend played e6 in this position. Pretty natural human move. The engines are pointing out a5. Yeah, I don't know why that at this moment this should be particularly effective, but that's what they really like. But e6 is a very natural move from black here. And now knight f3. So actually this position had already been reached in the game Mykonos against, oh my goodness, Mnatsakanyan in a Soviet Union tournament in 1967. And white had gone knight e4. So knight f3 is a novelty, but pretty sensible move from Mariotti. Bishop b7. Completely decent for black. The engine's actually looking at just not putting the bishop on b7 straight away. You'll see why not, actually. But playing the move knight d7, queen b1, a6, and then actually playing for a quick knight b6. It's a very interesting idea, actually. The point is that yeah, you want to either force white to give up the pressure against the queen side, or to play a takes b5 when you can play c takes b5 and get the diagonal nice and open for the bishop. Quite a nice idea to play the knight d7 to b6 so quickly like that. Yeah, Bhend played bishop b7, which is quite natural. And now Mariotti played h4. Wow, Mariotti's quite amazing. He really used his rook's pawns a lot. We've seen it already a few times, and you see it throughout his games. He really was ahead of his time. He'd fit right into to the modern game with all the engines pushing their rook's pawns. Yeah, I mean, what's the idea of h4? Actually, Mariotti's looking to play the rook h3 to g3 to attack g7, maybe anticipating that black will castle kingside and, yeah, wanting to get the pieces sort of in there already. And of course, if the rook's going to come out h3 to g3, you don't need to worry about your king. It can just tuck itself into f1. A little bit like, the no castling chess that Kramnik and Anand were trying out. So I thought that was a pretty nice idea, actually. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, and now knight d7 from Bhend. Slightly incautious move, actually, and we'll see why. Again, the engines are looking for a6, and then as quick as possible, knight d7 to b6 to try and force a decision on the queen side again. After knight d7, Mariotti played a very cunning move here. He played the move queen b1. So hitting this b5 pawn. And the point is that you're not only threatening to take on b5, you're also pinning this pawn to this bishop on b7. Now, the engines are actually not too amazed by queen b1, but the reply that they find is not easy for a human player to evaluate. I mean, basically what the engines say is we'll play rook b8 here. A takes b5, c takes b5. Now, of course, queen b5, bishop takes f3 wins a piece, so you can't do that with white. But you can take the pawn on a7 and get your pawn back. But after queen b6, queen a1, for example, bishop e7, yeah, the engines just think that, black's got a very nice position here. You can castle kingside quite quickly, play b4 to undermine the center. Bishop takes f3 coming in. Once you've castled, maybe you can go rook e8, get control of the a file. It's just a nice position for black, and yeah, white doesn't really have very much anymore. White's sort of given away, all the dynamic advantage he had just to recapture that pawn on a7. But it's not 100% obvious somehow. What Bhend did was quite interesting, actually. He played knight b6, and when I saw it, I was thinking, oh, wait a minute. Why not a takes b5 there? But, well, the idea is to play c5 in this position. And you're attacking the center, you've kept this c4 pawn, so you're cramping white's position a bit, and you've managed to get the bishop active. It's actually the engines give this still as a slight advantage for black. But Mariotti takes a much more active decision. He played the move a5, using those rook's pawns again, knight d5, and then bishop takes c4. And, the idea behind Mariotti's move is that, black isn't getting his bishop free yet in the other line. After a takes b5, c5, this bishop is getting active straight away. Just what you want to do always in the semi-Slav, get the bishop on the long diagonal and then open it. Black's still some way from achieving that. So, yeah, that's what, Mariotti is sort of trying to keep black bottled up in that case. Bhend played a6 in this position. The engines want to play rook b8. Similar sort of idea, really, but at least this bishop's protected. That's the point. So that might enable you to get to play c5 later, maybe after playing bishop b7 and castles, without needing to actually protect that pawn on b5 first. So after a6, you'll still be a move away from getting in c5. Bishop e2 played, and the key problem is that if c5, then we're playing c4 with white. So and if b takes c4, of course, queen b7 is possible. So black still has to make a move to defend the bishop on b7 before you can play c5. So black did that with rook b8. The engines prefer queen d7 in actual fact, and they think it's kind of okay for black. Bishop e7, and if queen e4, then we play c5. But white's got some decent attacking chances. Black can't castle kingside, of course, because of bishop h6. You've got to find a way to defend this this pawn. One interesting idea is to play h5, looking for queen takes g7, castle queenside, which is really sharp, of course. The black king quite open on the queen side, but well, the white pieces aren't exactly there to attack it, and well, you've got to work out how you're going to get your queen back into play somehow. So that's a very interesting idea, very interesting way of playing there. Ben played rook b8, which is, I guess, a bit more solid, a bit more normal. Just looking for c5 on subsequent moves now. So, yeah, Mariotti played rook h3. Not the move that the engines wanted, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistent with what Mariotti played with the move h4. Just looking to play rook g3, dissuade black from playing bishop e7 and castles. And of course, since black has played the move rook b8, castling queenside isn't on the agenda anymore. So, the king could easily just get stuck in the center there. I mean, another interesting point is if you go, if, for example, you did something like bishop e7, rook g3, rook g8, then, this queen on b1 is very effective here. It could also come into h7 as well. All sorts of little points there. But after rook h3, Bend played very concretely. He played the move c5 here. And, black's doing fine here. I mean, black's got pretty much what he wants in a semi-Slav, protected the queen side, played the move c5, freed the light squared bishop. D takes c5 now from Mariotti. King f1 is what the engines prefer. But, I mean, yeah, Mariotti's going for an attack here. No worries. Queen c7 from Bend here. Just quite a nice move, actually. Just attacking the pawn on e5 and preparing to take on the c5 next move. Pretty decent. If bishop takes c5 immediately, actually, you'd have to watch out a little bit for bishop takes b5 check. Watch out for this tactic, looking for takes, and then queen takes b5, forking the king and the bishop. So got to be a bit careful about that one. So queen c7 just attacks the pawn on e5 and make sure that when the bishop takes on c5, it's protected. So rook g3 was played by Mariotti here. And black played the move queen takes c5, and that is, after all, the most natural move. Rook g3 has stopped you from taking on c5 with the bishop because g7 is attacked. So taking with the queen on the c5 there. Only that's not 100% true. This is the glory of analysing this with engines, because the engines were just saying bishop takes c5 here is possible. Why on earth could that be? You might want to stop the video here and think what black might have against the move rook takes g7. It's incredibly cunning, actually. It's knight takes c3, obviously forking queen and bishop, so you've got to take it back. And now the beautiful retreat, bishop f8, hitting the bishop on c3 and the rook on g7. Ooh was my commentary to the game there. So yeah, I mean, that's really quite beautiful somehow. So yeah, really, really nice somehow. So that means that black can go bishop c5, and if you do something like king f1, then we go g5, and well, we're ready to have the h file opened there. So really, yeah, this maneuver rook h3 to g3 has turned out not to be particularly effective there, but needs a bit of stellar tactics there to achieve it. I mean, when Bend played queen takes c5 here, then I mean, actually Mariotti's plan has worked quite well now. So the queen's taken on c5. Yeah, the pawn on g7 is still going to be attacked. And, well, after queen takes c5, Mariotti played knight d4 here. And, yeah, because the queen's no longer attacking e5, you can bring the knight into play. And there's some moves starting to come in, right? I mean, stuff like knight takes and queen g6, bishop h5 coming in. All sorts of threats are in the air. I mean, in actual fact, black needed a really good move here, and a far from obvious one. And what the engines wanted was to play the move knight e7 in this position, just coming round, looking maybe to attack with knight f5 and also attacking the pawn on e5. If f4, then knight f5, could be quite cunning. I'm not quite sure whether that's cunning immediately, but these threats are definitely in the air. The engines wanted to play king f1, but then black takes the pawn with e5. There's still, counterplay in the air and everything, but it's looking pretty decent for black somehow. Black played the move h5, which is a bit of a funny one. I think basically the black was kind of, worried about playing g6 and all the sacrifices that might turn up. Yeah, worried that white would just play the move h5 and clamp down on the g7 square, and thought, okay, I'll just the one thing I can do here is to solidify the king side, and maybe I'll be able to go g6 later. Who knows? But it's a little bit. I mean, it doesn't particularly do very much, and of course, it also does give the g5 square away to the bishop. And with the bishop able to come to g5, this king is somewhat restricted there. So there's danger to the king there. Black's king, black's still some way from castling. Can't castle queenside, and obviously bishop e7 drops the g7 pawn. And well, when it's those sort of circumstances, a king caught in the centre, development far away, what Mariotti is going to do. He's going to start sacrificing, and this is a very nice sacrifice, very brave sacrifice, long term, just for some checks and some queenside pawns, and the ability to drive away this knight with the move c4. Not obvious at all, this one, but yeah, pretty good in actual fact. Yeah, I mean, black would actually like to sort of not capture this knight and exploit this pin on the queen. But I mean, if you go something like bishop c6, I've got knight c7 check, and queen b8 is going to be possible. And if you go bishop a8, this was something that the engines were doing, then c4 is quite nice. A b5, c takes d5, and well, I mean, white's doing quite nicely with a nice pass pawn, and still no kingside development for black. So a takes b5 was played, and now bishop takes b5. And believe it or not, the engines are saying plus 2.02. So massive evaluation, really justifying Mariotti's sacrifice there. Really impressive. King d8 was played. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to play king e7, of course, because, king's blocking in the bishop, and you're also exposed to g5. So king d8, and now the move c4 from Mariotti. Actually, this turns out to be a mistake, according to the engines. The engines wanted to get out of this pin first, actually, and play the move queen d3, looking for the move c4. It's actually very difficult for black here. You've also got moves like a6 coming in as well. So, all over the shop, basically, you're attacking. I mean, if you try to get out with the king c7, I mean, c4 is possible here because knight b4, queen d7 is checkmate. So, yeah, quite a shocking one, that one. So queen d3 would have been best because after c4, bishop a6 was a really good move. Just, yeah, I mean, exploiting that pin, and you're going to take on b5 basically, and then your knight on d5 is still going to be safe. I mean, white's going to have a couple of screaming pass pawns on the queen side, but should give you some time with black to get yourself organized. So rook b3 was played by Mariotti. Bishop takes b5, and c takes b5. And yeah, I mean, what a position, this one. Quite incredible, really. It's I mean, those white pawns are pretty fast, right? I mean, b6, b7, and a6 to a7. It's not that far away, and of course, with the king being caught a little bit in the crossfire, not easy to develop the pieces with black to any clear purpose. I mean, I'd much rather be white here. It just shows, yeah, I mean, the real quality of Mariotti's sacrifice here, because this is way easier to play for white than for black. So, I mean, Bhend played the very natural bishop e7, and the engines are screaming 3.26 now. I mean, the evaluation bar has gone all over the place there. Actually, what the engines wanted was quite a nice move, actually, queen d4. Just with the idea that the bishop's not going to be developed to e7, it's going to be developed to c5, hitting f2, and it's going to cause some reaction from white basically. It's always in these sort of positions, you can see why it's got a clear plan of advancing the queenside pawn. So it's all about doing something to create a reaction and force white to take measures. And obviously the move bishop c5, white's got to think about that. I mean, there's also queen takes e5 check as well, which, would also free the d6 square for the bishop, allow the king to move to e7 and, yeah, just free black up just a little bit more. But after bishop e7, Mariotti played the move queen d3. Pretty strong move. There's all sorts of moves there, but queen d3 is pretty good. Queen c7 and f4. And it's quite funny, actually. I mean, Mariotti isn't really playing the moves that the engines recommend. I mean, none of the moves that Mariotti is choosing for the next few moves, for these and the next few moves, are really the engine's top moves. They're not being chosen in my engine games, but the evaluation is still great, So yeah, I mean, basically he's playing very, very well. Not the absolute engine way, but yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe losing 5 centipawns or something per move. Nothing at all, and still keeping a huge advantage. So king d7, and then b6, queen c5, and king e2. We're just, yeah, Mariotti just playing very nicely here, dealing with the threat of queen g1. King nice and in the center there, and then b7, a6, a7 is going to come in. And there's also, I mean, black's also got to watch out for a move like rook c1 when the queen's got no moves. So, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So Bhend actually took a very good decision here, I think, practically. He played bishop h4, so he's looking for queen f2. And after g3, he just sacked the bishop. And yeah, I mean, that bishop is useless. I mean, at least now the king's got a square on e7, and you've got some checks. You've got some space to check there. Then played queen c4 check, and I was a bit surprised by Mariotti. I mean, I was expecting queen d3, and that's the engine move somehow. I mean, you don't really see what else black can do apart from exchange off queens, and then, well, we're gonna. I mean, these are just really going to run. I mean, it's you just can't stop these guys. So. This looked really, really strong, but rook d3 was played by Mariotti, and it's still very strong as well. I mean, it's a 1.81 still, and of course, I think maybe what Mariotti was thinking about was going, rook c1 with tempo, and then getting rook c7, and of course, the queen's attacking g7. You get some very nice lateral attacks along the 7th rank there. It's just that keeping the queens on with the king in the center and some light squares for the black queen just feels a little bit more risky somehow, but it's not a big deal in principle. So queen e4 check played, king f2, rook c8, and rook e1. Yeah, I mean, queen f3 still very reasonable, and the engine's still quite liking that, but rook e1 played by Mariotti. Queen to f5, and now this move rook d4. This is a very nice move, this one, just covering everything laterally, stopping rook c4, and also allowing the queen to come across, which will be quite nice. I mean, we've got some threats there against the black king as well. So g6 played. I think if I'd been black, I'd be looking for something a bit more violent. I mean, the engines were looking at stuff like rook e2 and then g5. This was Torch's idea, and yeah, this would be more what I would be looking for. You've got to blow things up somehow. Yeah, I mean, no idea if it's good or not, but you really have to try and make something, because long term, those pawns on the queen side, they're a little bit blocked now, but they're not gonna stay there forever somehow. I think Bhend was thinking about putting the king to safety on the king's side, so he decided to make a safe house there. But yeah, rook e2 from Mariotti must have been difficult playing this one in time trouble. I think that's why this bishop h4 takes g3 idea from Bhend was so nice. I mean, if your opponent's king is open, there's always chances, and the opponent always has to to look an awful lot to see what am I missing something or whatever. But yeah. King e8 played by Bhend, and now queen b3, and got to watch out now, because b7 followed by a6 is a big threat here. King f8, well, b7, rook c6, and now it's one of those things where you're getting the king safe, but actually you're kind of a bit too slow, because queen a3 check happened now, and now white's going to get in a6, and well, when the pawn's on a6, it's definitely moving on to a7 pretty quickly. Was a bit surprised by Bhend's move now. He played king to g8. Bit weird not to play king g7 somehow. I mean, if a pawn's gonna queen somehow and reach the 8th rank, then you would have said, well, get the king off the 8th rank, and then that might speed you up with with your counter attack. But he didn't do that. He went a6, and now he played the move rook c3. Dun dun dun, all a bit desperate, but I mean, a7 was happening. White was going to pick up a rook anyway. Rook c3, so bishop takes c3 was played, knight f4. A little bit of 40th move desperation, I think. It's pretty clear that, I mean, well, White's got all those trumps there, and well, I mean, we can always give up the rook for the knight there, and Black's only got the queen, and yeah, I mean, you'll have a few checks. But this was a nice way to finish it somehow. Just you got all these passed pawns here. You'll be able to make them queen, no problem. So just give the queen back there. And well, Ben didn't even take it, but after queen c4, rook c2, he resigned because well, if rook d6, actually we'll go b8 queen first of all, and then take back on d6. That was a very, very interesting game. I mean, I think you can, what really impressed me, as always, with Mariotti was interesting opening idea. I mean, he wasn't a theoretician particularly, but I think he had lots of interesting ideas. But, you just sort of see just the non-concrete thinking, basically, or rather the concrete thinking, the non-standard thinking, I mean. This move h4, simply looking for rook h3 to g3. It's not a common idea at all in this opening. I mean, certainly in the 1970s, it's a pioneer era, this, and playing with the rook's pawns on both sides of the board. And then, just lots of little tactics exploiting this queen b1 somehow, and then, of course, this piece sacrifice on b5. I mean, we see it with the engine, and they sort of say, oh yeah, okay, it's +2, it's winning. But from a human perspective, you don't. It was just done for long-term compensation. The two pawns, the king exposed. The pawn moves to drive away the knight from d5 and the passed queenside pawns. And Mariotti didn't play it absolutely perfectly, but he played it very, very well. Yeah, just a very unusual game with those two passed pawns, and Black unable to do something. But it was all to do with the factor that Mariotti was exploiting when he sacrificed, which was the king's position. I mean, this king's position continued to haunt Black, because he just couldn't get his pieces properly developed, couldn't get his rooks into the game quickly. And even when trying to bring it back to safety, he just got caught by, checks, which helped the queenside pawns move through. So, yeah, a really lovely game from Mariotti there. Really enjoyed that one. So there we are. I'm carrying on with this series. I hope you're enjoying it. It's really nice, a real journey of discovery for me. So, if you like the videos, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement and Reengineering the Chess Classics. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you for the next videos. Thanks for watching.